Welcome to the HER Digital Asset Group podcast series, where we interview thought leaders in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. Today, we are very excited to have Erica Amatori, co-founder of TheBitDaily, a blockchain news platform that educates its users through newsletters, guides, and interviews with thought leaders. So, Erica, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so to start off, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the blockchain crypto space?
Yeah, of course. So kind of a tech nerd, startup lover, one could say, and of course, crypto investor. To give a little backstory, I helped start a SaaS company in college that later got acquired. And after that, I was the head of marketing of a fintech company. So I've always had a passion for new emerging concepts as well as finance. Currently, I'm the co-founder of TheBit, like you said, thebitdaily.com, which is a simple and curated newsletter that keeps you updated in a very volatile space in 3 minutes or less, and it's built by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. We also offer guides for beginners to experts and interview industry leaders in blockchain. So that's a little about kind of my backstory, how I got into the crypto space, and it's really interesting because how I initially got interested was actually through my co-founder, Chris Hoyle. He introduced me to mining, and he used to mine when it was like below $1,000. So he took interest in it really early on and said, "Hey, Erica, you should really pay attention to the crypto space." And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" I was looking at Bitcoin at the time. I was like, "This is already overvalued." And then month by month, I see it crawl and crawl up, and I'm like, maybe he's on to something. So that's who initially got me involved.
Wow, so it sounds like you and your co-founder, got into the space relatively early and arguably took a very different path than most of your peers. Can you sort of touch on what the early adopters of blockchain crypto like yourself have in common?
Yeah, of course. And I think there's a couple things. It's never just one trait or characteristic of a person that makes them an early adopter of either an industry or space. So one is to have an open mind, right? Many people shut ideas out or close them because technology is just not there yet, or it changes something so big and it's just hard to comprehend for people. And you can't think that way. You have to think about the long-term potential of an idea or concept. Two, I would say, is being the dumbest person in the room. So I do this through constantly networking with people way more brilliant than myself. And I know that I may not be able to keep up initially, but I will eventually. And that in itself will put me ahead of others in due time and overall make me an early adopter if I keep talking to people that are ahead of trends. And lastly, I think it's really about a person's willingness to learn. It's really hard when the info is very technical or buried in Reddit threads, which is very common in the cryptocurrency space. So you got to stay driven and really try to shut out the noise as much as possible.
Yeah, I think the openness and willingness to learn aspects that you touch upon is extremely important. So you mentioned a little bit about your co-founder who, was mining Bitcoin very early on. Who else is on your leadership team today? Can you sort of provide some context on their backgrounds?
Yeah, so Chris is a software developer, like I said, and he's the one that actually built thebitdaily.com. He is a very talented designer as well. And he's actually developing our community platform that's going to launch next month as well. He and I actually met in college, so we actually have very similar backgrounds, except for he's very much in computer science and I'm more in the growth and marketing side. He has always been, like I said, very interested in mining cryptocurrency and keeping up to date with everything that's happening in the space. Other than that, we are a very lean team. We do have a writer named Sean. He's in Austin. We're actually all over the place. Chris is in DC. I'm in New York. Sean is Austin. And he actually has written for a lot of cryptocurrency and blockchain publications. And so we hired him to basically write the newsletters, guides, any content that we may need. And then we're also going to be hiring a designer soon.
I think the newsletter is a very interesting route to go about blockchain education. As I mentioned before, BitDaily is a media and education platform focused on the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Can you walk us through your journey to starting the BitDaily and how you identified media and education as an opportunity in the blockchain crypto space? Especially touch upon your inspiration for the types of assets you guys roll out.
Yeah, of course. And I always love describing this story because so many people can relate to it. So when I took an interest in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin early on, I didn't understand it completely, 100%, mainly because all of the articles and research I read were very lengthy, complex, technical, steeped in data, which I love, but sometimes it was really hard to follow a white paper when you're not exactly a software developer or someone that is really knowledgeable in the tech space. So I learned it anyway, but every time a friend of mine really wanted to invest, which really happened in 2017, as you can imagine, when it was booming, they would either invest without knowing what it truly does or is, or they would try to read up on it and quit pretty quickly because it was too technical. And that's a huge problem in the cryptocurrency space overall is adoption. And so I thought, why can't this be easy? Why can't it be simpler to understand and then invest? And how can we better educate in a fun and more engaging way while also building a strong and helpful community? So I took actually some of the earnings I made while trading Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin and reinvested it into making the Bit. So at that time, Chris made a website. I was the one writing the newsletters. It was very simplistic, condensed, curated, top stories of the day. Like I said, you could read in 3 minutes or less. And it gained a lot of word of mouth traction quickly because it was kind of like the skim for cryptocurrency. Even though the skim's audience is definitely more female oriented, ours is actually 90% male oriented still. But it just overall simplifies everything down. So whether you're a beginner to an expert, you can understand it. So this was a huge concept for us to push, especially because, and this article is going to come out very, very soon, and we're very excited to launch it because it's in collaboration with a company called Perksy, which is a data company. And they basically did a huge survey on blockchain education. And one of the questions was, do you know what Bitcoin is? 70% of people said yes. Do you know what cryptocurrency is? Only like 40 to 50 people said yes. So you can see that there's a huge discrepancy between people relating how cryptocurrency relates to Bitcoin, how cryptocurrency relates to blockchain. So it really is about educating and truly informing people in the space so they're not investing in something they don't know.
Cryptocurrency investing is one of the few areas where retail investors are actually front-running institutional investors. And if we think about, just want to go back on your point of adoption, blockchain's transformative nature has often been compared to the internet in terms of the level of disruption on current business and economic landscape. But if we consider the number of people with crypto wallets as an indicator of adoption, we can see that it's actually magnitude smaller than the adoption rate of popular internet applications such as Facebook and WhatsApp. So you touch upon education as a major barrier to adoption, but what do you think are some of the other barriers to adoption from the perspective of both consumers and industries?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of areas where it can be improved. One is just overall reputation of Bitcoin and lack of trust, right? So reputation of Bitcoin has gone kind of slammed over the year for scams, ICOs, and so that has led people to become really scared about it. Two is it's very difficult to use still. The user must know how to use private public keys and go through dozens of steps to acquire and use cryptocurrency. So I think that there's a huge barrier in that there's no really easy guide to doing all of this. And the Bit, even though we try to do that, the guides on the Bit are actually very simple, like how to invest with your wallet, blah, 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 blah. But you still see people going on these websites that don't exactly look the most user-friendly and getting scared to use it. So it is a lot about branding, which I can talk about branding all day long. And that's what I think a lot of companies and media companies in the blockchain space aren't doing correctly. And then last but not least, I would say there's, again, like lack of education is huge, but the regulatory environment is also a huge barrier. The primary challenge for the broadest adoption of blockchain technology is regulation, because in many cases it prevents and slows adoption of many institutions that deploy the technology in ways that utilize all of its benefits. So it's really interesting to see the regulatory environment, I would say, increase, because it's definitely getting to a point where it's less of a gray area, but it's still very much a gray area.
I want to pivot a little bit and kind of get your understanding of other platforms similar to TheBitDaily in this space. What's your view on some of the other media and education platforms, and what do you think some of their strengths are, and where do you see them fall short? If you could go into detail about how TheBitDaily's offerings are differentiated, that would be really helpful to understand the landscape of media education platforms in blockchain and crypto.
Yeah, so to start off with your first question, which is basically, why are some education platforms doing wrong? What are they doing wrong? First of all, there's just a lot of noise in the space. You'll see articles on everything to scams to this coin tripled, this blah, blah, blah. Like, there's a lot of noise in the space, which is what media platforms are supposed to reduce, right? They're supposed to inform you and inspire you and update you. They're not necessarily supposed to just like vomit in your face all of this news. So that's something that I think that blockchain media platforms in the space don't really do well yet. Another one is going back to the brand thing. Nobody really has a great brand yet. So right now I'm also the director of marketing at Burrow, which is a huge direct-to-consumer company. And our brand is very, very, very good. But what I tell people in basically the BDC market is you can have so many companies in a space and it can be really saturated, but it doesn't matter, because if there's no one with a good brand, that's a huge opportunity gap. And with blockchain and crypto, there's already a huge opportunity gap. But the fact that nobody really has a great brand yet is even a bigger one. So that's something that TheBit does really well, is create a brand for ourselves, really around this simplistic and holistic community. And then I think another thing that education platforms don't do well is write and condense in a short manner. We do not have huge attention spans nowadays with multitasking and technology. We cannot spend 2 hours just reading a white paper. I know some people do, but a lot of people don't. And they actually either trust their friends who are reading it or their analyzer. So having media companies really break down the information, which is what TheBit does, into a condensed, simple format, really helps people not only understand it better, but overall speak about it in a broader light. So I think TheBit does news different in a couple ways. It condenses it, it simplifies it, but you don't lose any of the important facts. And it really does shut out all of the noise that you don't need to know. That's not important to investors, to people just learning in this space, to experts that are coding and mining. So that's a little bit about why we're different.
I really like how you guys have a pretty big emphasis on the user experience, and especially with all these different hard wallets, the user experience is really lacking at this point. So I think we definitely need more companies that see it from the user to make adoption higher. And then on your point about noise, I totally agree with that. In such a nascent market where the information's scattered, not always trusted, getting valuable insights and sorting through the noise before others is a huge competitive advantage. At HCR, we have been very lucky because our community of CEOs, miners have been tremendously helpful to help us get access to new developments. Can you share some of your thoughts on both the online and offline communities for blockchain, crypto, and how they kind of help foster collaboration and elevate overall knowledge?
Yeah, for sure. And my first comment on this is the crypto community is the best community. Sometimes, yeah, it can be a lot of trolls, but overall, everybody is so willing to help each other out, so willing to educate each other, which is why I just love it. And I think that the the best way to foster collaboration and elevate knowledge is through providing a really good community. And that's something that Vitalik has really tried to do. And if whenever his community kind of gets out of hand, he's like, look, guys, I'm going to leave if you don't like whip back into shape. But what really makes a good community? And that's something that I ask myself all the time while building TheBit. And the answer to that is curation. Curation is very, very important if you want to have a community that's focused on many things, but like I said, they not necessarily noise. Another huge factor of a community is exclusivity. So making sure that the community wants to learn, that there's nobody in there that's just spreading scams around or is just shilling. We don't want those people. We want the people that want to learn. We want the driven people of the world. We want the people that keep each other updated, that educate the beginners, that help out the experts, etc. So that's a huge part of a community. And then lastly, I really think it's about organization. How are you providing kind of a framework to the madness? Because a lot of times communities, forums, anything can really get out of hand unless there's some type of moderation. So I think that really helps foster collaboration between the whole community. And where it gets muddy is offline to online communities. Online communities, they're accessible to anywhere in the world. Offline, of course, your meetups are dependent on your location. And some locations, you can be trading anywhere all over the world, but there's very specific hubs where blockchain is prevalent. So I say for offline, it's a little different, right? Because you have to actually either establish one yourself or you have to join a really good community that is that's filled with good people. So that's kind of my thoughts on where community lies in the blockchain space.
So does the TheBitDaily have any plans to foster any type of either online or offline communities in the near term?
Yes. So right now, as I said, we're mainly a educational platform with a newsletter. Soon, we're actually going to be launching a community platform that curates the best companies in the space, that curates funds in the space, that curates basically just a bunch of resources, kind of like Product Hunt, but specifically niche for the blockchain space. And people can upvote companies, people can downvote companies. There's going to be condensed versions of white papers, which is huge. And people can start a conversation around them, which is really important. So that's actually coming next month. And it's going to be really exciting to get everybody on the platform and actually start the conversation. We also want to incentivize certain people. So if you're posting a company on the platform that's getting upvoted and downvoted, you should get points towards that. You should get points toward contributing because we want people to contribute and we want people to get involved as much as possible and we want quality content. So that's what we're working on right now is how to best reward people for interacting with the community.
That sounds very exciting. I'm definitely looking forward to that community rolling out soon. I also want to understand a little bit about the partnerships you guys have in place in terms of the types of partners you interact with and the kind of relationships you form with them. How do you form a symbiosis where both sides can get some benefits out of it?
Yeah, we're planning to partner within many different industries and verticals. Blockchain startups in the space, such as portfolio trackers, tech companies, regulation hubs, those are all great to partner with, as we're a media company that can really shed light on the cool stuff they're doing to build and grow the space and make it more efficient. And then how that benefits us is obviously we get more content on our platform. We get more engagement. We get more people, more traffic to our website, which in turn can turn into revenue. So we're also planning to partner with maybe some hedge funds and investment firms and groups that want to keep updated on news and educate their analysts. So there's a lot of just different ways we can partner with companies. Partnering with education platforms would be great. Ones that aren't even involved in crypto, but want to provide resources on that to further continue education in this area. So there's a lot of different ways that we can benefit each other through just different arraying partnerships.
Yeah, it's super interesting how you can kind of touch both in the media industry, but then also on the investment side, but then also on the blockchain startup side because of where you exist and the types of content you're producing.
I really think that's the beauty of it. You're bringing in everybody in the industry to work as one.
Yeah, and what's interesting with blockchain is that very unlikely partnerships between incumbents are starting to form. And you're also seeing a lot of incumbent organizations form partnerships with new startups. So it's just really interesting to see, as this space pans out, what the future ecosystem is going to look like per vertical. So before we wrap up, I want to get a sense of what you envision for the BitDaily down the line.
What I envision for the BitDaily is to provide an overall platform that can not only educate people, but inspire people. And that's through talking to industry leaders. And hopefully those industry leaders are on our platform in some shape or way. And I really do want to build a greater community while also being a resource aggregator and provider. So that's really the long-term goal of the Bit.
I think just from speaking to you today, it sounds like what the BitDaily offers is very unique in the market. And I think really excited to see more and more content that'll help elevate the understanding and just create mass adoption from that aspect. So thank you so much for joining our podcast today, and good luck with the launch of the community.
Thanks for having me.